So I had a dream that I was driving. And as I was driving, I started not to be able to see. Like I was going blind as I drove. And I'm like, what is happening? I could only see like flashes of light. And I keep like swerving the car, like just trying to like judge it. And I'm like, I'm going to crash. And I was like, I think I was drugged. And then as I'm waking up, Neil's getting ready for work. And I'm like telling him about the stream. And I'm like, this is so weird and so random. And then I'm like, oh, wait, actually, I watched a bunch of P. Diddy
bunch of P. Diddy.
Because so now Neil's like, were you at a P. Diddy party? And I'm like, I don't know. I just know that I was driving on this dark road. And then all of a sudden I couldn't see.
Welcome to Talk Like a Mother Parenting Autism Podcast. We are Jen, Kim, Rachel, and Jaime. Take a seat at our table as we share with hope, humor, and honesty. Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Talk Like a Mother. I'm here with Kim and Jen again. Rachel still has some stuff going on. She's not going to be with us again today, but that's all right. We would rather have her be with the people that she needs to be with right now. So we've decided for the second episode of our fall series to talk about the fact that it's AAC Awareness Month and kind of raise some awareness and kind of just talk about our kids in general with communication and why AAC devices are important and when they come into play. So October is AAC Awareness Month. So if you don't know, it's for Augmentative and Alternative Communication is the AAC. And many people use AAC devices. It's not just something for autism. 1 in 200 people around the world could benefit from access to a communication device. 75% of those with Parkinson's disease, 70% of people with MND, 20 to 30% of people who've had a stroke, and then 15% of people with learning difficulties, 10% of people with dementia, and then 10% of autistic people. So it's really, I don't know, when I think of AAC devices, I think of autism, but clearly it's for an array of people with different disabilities or different needs to communicate.
I never even thought about that. Really, and everything. I never thought outside of the autism part of it.
I think also a lot of people associate AAC with AAC devices, which is like the speech devices and the talkers and stuff like that. But it's all kinds of alternative communication, like sign language is considered AAC, using pictures, the PEC system, all that stuff is also AAC. I just feel like it's more common for, especially in our community, to be like the speech devices, but right. It kind of covers all that stuff. So
yeah, we didn't use that. Ironically enough, I started back in speech today with her original speech therapist, speech language pathologist, and we did a little bit of sign when she was younger, not extensive sign, but a little bit for communication. And then I was telling Kimmy James, she had what is it, Kimmy prologue to go on her iPad, that one. But we didn't use a lot of it. But we did the PECs around our house and that kind of stuff. But I find the device fascinating. I think it's just so great for communication. Gives people a voice.
Well, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast before is, even though some of our kids are verbal now, in the past, it was more difficult. I remember thinking like, oh, if we tried to do an AAC device, I felt like it would replace him wanting to speak. Like that was a real fear of mine. And now like that my son's older, I wish I had tried that because because all the studies show that it actually can promote them. And one of the hardest parts with autism is the lack of communication, especially when the kids are younger. That is where a lot of the behaviors and stuff come from, because could you imagine not being able to communicate? And still to this day with my son, it's like he gets so frustrated, or you can tell so hard he wants to communicate something. You can see the fact that it's not making it from his brain to his mouth. And it's so frustrating for him. And I'm like, oh, so it can help people in so many ways. And the most frustrating thing about it is like the costs of these devices and these programs. It's like, why can this not be more accessible? And why isn't there like more of it? Like it's hard. And we'll talk a little bit about too, this is a really good month if you are wanting to get one of these programs. They usually have really good discounts during October. Do we want to maybe go around? We can talk a little bit about our kids' communication journeys and how that went for us. Kimmy, do you want to start?
Obviously, Alyssa being nonverbal, like she's used AAC methods her whole life, basically. But when she was around 16, the speech devices became a little more accessible or well known. I don't know exactly when they came out. We were able to get a grant from the Easter seals, they gave not a grant, we got a loan, so they loaned us a speech device so she could try it out to kind of see how she could take to it before like we went, to purchase it and all that stuff. We actually got a grant, so the grant covered her iPad, it covered the software, which the software is expensive, but like we're still using the same software that we purchased when she was 16, and it's been 12 years. So they updated, obviously, just like all the other apps and stuff like that. And it's a little more expensive than it was back then, but like not terribly more expensive, because I've actually thought about just repurchasing it because it has to stay with your Apple ID. And I had to change my Apple ID on my phone because we just had like a issue with the Apple ID. And it's only like $50 more than it was back then, which is, kind of crazy, 12 years. So they started that with her when she was 16. And like the problem we have is that like, it's really hard to like integrate a new way of learning something when you're 16, even though like, yep, her level isn't quite 16 and it's behind and all that stuff. She kind of set in her way at this point, and she's always just been super resistant to all the methods of communication that we've used. She always did them at school, but then she wouldn't do them at home because I think her expectation was like, you know what I want, lady, you figure it out. And like, that's that. Like, I really think she associates school with like work, and like she didn't want to do that work at home, even though it like helps her and makes everything so much less frustrating for her. It's just like a frustrating thing for all of us because it's like I want her to do these things to ease up her frustration, but like it's so frustrating trying to get her to do it when she just won't do it or doesn't want to do it or can't do it, because a lot of it has to do with also the processing. It's like that initiation skill is just really like difficult for her, even though like sometimes she'll know what she wants and she has the word, like she can say the word, she like can't necessarily like do it, even though it's like I'll be like, okay, it's here, like say it, like, and she like will just look at you. It's like she can't get that, like retrieve that information, filter it like through her brain to her motor system, and then like get it out of her mouth. But then like another time she can. So it's like it's just really inconsistent, which makes it like, kind of hard. But she did great with it at school. And then she would never use it at home. And then when she transitioned into adult services, like I sent her iPad to school, she wouldn't use it. If they touched it, if they took it out of her bag, she would freak out. So they're like, yeah, like we're not gonna make her use that because it's like human rights and she's an adult and she gets to choose. And I'm like, yeah, she doesn't though, because it's like this is your only way to communicate with her. Like you're taking your way of communicating with her away. But there's just different regulations and different rules, and they look at it differently when you're an adult. And they're like, sometimes when say people get to this age, they decide they don't want to do it. They're kind of done with that stuff. And I'm like, this is somebody who's nonverbal though.
This is her voice. That's so annoying.
I kind of realized in hindsight, which I do a lot with Alyssa, I think that like now I was like looking at the iPad one day and I'm like, oh, it has all her old teachers on it. It has all her old classrooms. It has everything catered to her old school that didn't really pertain to the new school. So like in her mind, she was like, yeah, like I'm not using this here. This doesn't even make that makes sense to her. And like I can see how it didn't make sense to her because like it wasn't set up for that new place. Also, she's just a stubborn witch sometimes.
She's communicating right now. I can hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she just heard me talking about her and she's like, don't be talking about me. You want a hug? Oh, I love you. So then I was like, shoot, what do I do now? Now, like she was using it at school and she's done great with it. And now she's not going to use it at all because she won't use it at home. And now she won't use it with a new program. So then I found a speech therapist that would take adults and they worked with her. She's not doing speech right now. It kind of she got pretty resistant to it when they had to do a lot of virtual speech over like COVID.
That's impossible. I don't care what anyone says. That's really hard for our kids to sit through.
Not only is it very difficult, like she did kind of adapt okay, but they kept switching therapists. I mean, I know they couldn't keep people in there. They were like on the 4th different therapist in like a 4-month span. Like, and she was just like, she needs to know what to expect. So when you opening up that laptop and another person yet again is there, she just started refusing to do it. And it was just distressing her a lot. But going back to what Jaime said about like people, and this is a huge misconception where people think like, oh, if I get my child a speech device and they're going to use the speech device and they're not going to speak. And that's simply not true. Like I even noticed with her when she started using the speech devices, when we saw speech start to come, it's seeing that word paired with the sound constantly though, like constantly if they're hitting whatever is it, dog, they're seeing a dog and hearing dog. And it's like, it really gets in their memory and stuff like that so much easier. And then they make that
100%.
association.
There's something to learning from a non-human too with some kids. You know how they have like little robots and stuff they try to get kids on the spectrum. But I do think that would have benefit for Jesse to hear the word from not a human. I think he actually might have picked up on that better.
She really did start picking up a lot of words at the same time. And she just kind of had like an explosion at this time. So like, it's hard to say like what came from really what, but she still won't use it independently. I think for her, it was just, I think if she had this was available when she was like 4 or 5, I think it would have been a lot different for her. And yeah, so that's kind of hard. Every once in a while, once in a blue moon, like one day she took it out and she was like, I want brownie. And I was like, oh,
yes, girl.
Brownie at 11 o'clock at night, and you can use your device independently, unprompted, to let me know. But that's very rare. It's very rare for her to do that. Sometimes if like she's sick and I'm like, oh, can you show mama what hurts? Sometimes she can show us. But a lot of times, like if she's upset and I would pull it out, she'll just hit sad, which is like, she can't really tell you why. She'll just keep hitting sad, which is just like heartbreaking, She'll do it like, we'll do structured activities, we'll do flashcards and like games and different stuff like that. And if I sit with her and do structured activities, like she's very receptive to using it. I think I talked about this on the podcast where she was like wanting to watch a show and Kira was trying to figure out what show she wanted. And she put like, every show available on Disney Plus, and she wants you to like figure it out. And then she's getting different stuffed animals and different toys out of the toy box. And I'm like, I think she's trying to show us, which is also communication. I think she's trying to show us what she wants. And then finally I brought out the device. I was like, can you tell me what you want? Can you type it? And she typed in Octonauts. And I'm like, what? First of all, since when do you even know? I don't even know what Octonauts is. Since when have you ever watched the show? But like, I don't know. She watched it somewhere and now it's like her favorite show. So I think a lot of this communication stuff is just really letting them show you the different ways that they can communicate. Like for Alyssa, it's not ever going to be, oh, she just uses a speech device or she just does it this way. Like with her, it's just a kind of like across the board, like whatever method she's able to use at that time. Like sometimes she's really good at gesturing. I mean, she's very good at nonverbal communication, but like sometimes that's not enough to let us know something that's going on, something that she needs. I was telling the ladies before we came on that Alyssa had a catalog from the wholesale store near us, and she opened it up. And I said, do you want something? And she's looking at me and looking at my husband and looking down. But like, that's not, it's, 2 whole pages of stuff. And I was like, show me. And I was trying to get her to point, and like, she wouldn't do it. So I picked up a pen and I go, can you circle it? And she circled Oreos. Now, Alyssa, Oreo, yep. And she can say Oreo. But like, at that moment, she couldn't. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's just finding different methods for them to be able to show you. The other day, she came over to me and she had 3 little Octonauts in her hands. And of course I think I was on a call with you guys, and she was like saying something, and I was just kind of like, oh yeah. Like, and I'm like, she kept repeating a phrase that had nothing to do with Octonauts or anything. And then finally it clicked in my head and I was like, oh, do you want to watch Octonauts? And she said, yes. So she had these little Octonaut toys trying to show me that she wanted to watch them. So it's like, she shows you in different ways. And sometimes it's like, you just have to like figure out that's what she's doing. So like, we still try the AAC, like I still do pull it out here and there, but it's like, I wish she would do it more to like help her, let us know what's going on with her, but she just doesn't.
I was going to say, like, that mystery of like figuring out what they're wanting or sometimes it's like really fast. And then other times it's like all day. And it's especially hard when they're getting really frustrated because you can't figure it out. But like, there'll be moments where I'm like sitting like, this is what he meant, or this is what he was talking about.
And then don't you feel so smart all of a sudden? And don't you feel like you just conquered the world? Like, oh.
No, I got to buy tickets to Disney on Ice or whatever.
Yep.
What about you and Kaya, Jen? Your communication journey?
So Kaya was nonverbal until she was 5. And like I said, we did a little bit of sign in the beginning. So Jackie said something a lot of profound things to me. But one of them was, so many people expect so many things out of her. Therapy, school, all of these things. Everyone expects things out of her. And she can't even give a basic communication. And so any communication is communication. But she has to be able to communicate at least minimally she first has to communicate before people can expect all of these things out of her. And that was like, like how confusing will that be? Like you said, you have it there, but you can't get it out. And everyone's got all these demands on you. Right. So anyways, that for me, that was pretty moving in our journey. It just really was. But so we did a little bit of that. And then as her language progressed, you talked about knowing what, what, I don't want to say her name, Kimmy, I don't want to get her upset, but what she wants. And Kaya was also a very good nonverbal communicator. I always, she would take me to what she needed. Whatever she wanted, she knew where it was and she would take me to it. But even now, she's 14 and we today just saw her speech language pathologist for the first time in years. And so we're starting off from scratch with her. But one of the things I wanted to say when you guys were talking about the AAC device being communication, people didn't see the value in it, in the beginning, sort of on the value of it. And Jackie was very much like, yes, this is communication. And when we went to a center, you ladies know, we went to this place and the therapist was really hung up on Kaya's lack of language, like really couldn't get past her lack of language. It like really hung up on it. And I said, what if she had an AAC device? Would you not consider that communication because she's not verbally able to speak to you? And I thought at this day and age, there's just some people still don't understand that communication is communication. Any form of communication is good. It doesn't always have to be verbal. So it's been interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. We have a long way to go, but she's, she can get her wants and needs and express that kind of stuff. And I'm very, very grateful. Like last night, she'll say these random clusters of words. She said, put water on the table, which to most people, that doesn't seem like it. That's a lot of freaking words. Put water on the table. And it's meaningful because let's be clear, we wouldn't want her to lean over and put her own water on the table, which by the way, was directly beside her. And I was at the other end of the bed. But the point is language.
Alyssa has this great skill that she does, Jen, where it's like she points with her whole hand and she would tell you to put the water on the table with her whole hand and you would get that point real fast.
And you would put the water on the table. Yes, you would. Yeah. So
she also used to do this thing when she was little, like when you said bring you two things, she used to go to the fridge and slap the fridge. Like, want something in here, lady? And then of course we'd have to open it and let her kind of show us what she wanted. But yeah.
Well, we all know that I have a lot of people in my life and will comment if I ever Kaya always has an iPad in her hand. I don't try to hide it. I also feel like it's a comfort thing. Sometimes she's just listening to something up against her. She always has it with her. I get a lot of judgment from people. I don't care. It'll be the hill I die on. She has learned so much from her iPad. She has learned so much from freaking Elmo and Sesame Street and all of those things.
Yep.
She really has learned a lot. Let me tell you, she's also learned things I prefer she didn't learn. However, she has learned a lot of positive things on there.
Bridesmaids.
Bridesmaids, yes. Cheers to the first 4.5 minutes of John Hamm and Kirsten Wig. Cheers. A lot of explaining to do about that in grade 4.
And what's really cool is Jackie, who Jen has mentioned a million times on this podcast.
A million times.
So
life-changing. Yeah. And she said to me, no Hannon program. I promise you don't have to do that anymore. She's really doing different stuff. Yeah. It was fun. I'm really excited for what,
And it's crazy because Kiara's doing a big research paper, a 10-page paper on she's doing it on, don't ask me what, a lot of big words, but just the different methods for treating childhood apraxia, which Alyssa has. And it's crazy, like what are all these things? I've never heard of these things. You need to do all these things on your system. And one is they have an ultrasound technique where they it helps show where your tongue is, and it will help the person correctly put their tongue where it's supposed to be. That's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Technology's come a long way. So
it's crazy.
All the methods, learn them all and teach them to your sister.
Figure them out for us. Thanks, Kira. For Jesse, since the time you learned to speak, has had some words. So his first word that I can recall was our dog's name. And one day he just said it uber clear. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's his first word. It was a little late, but still within that time zone. And it just was like he was just always behind in word count in general. And then around 18 months, he just stopped communicating at all. And I will say, even before that, he wasn't great. Like Jesse has never been good at nonverbal communication to this day, unless it's something he's really wanting to show you or get his point across. But when he was little, I don't know. I don't even know if people truly understand. It just seemed like there was no desire to communicate. When he was a baby, I started doing sign language just around like food and like play things, because it was like, I mean, I know it's still a thing. It's to teach your baby sign language so that they can communicate. And the only things he picked up on was more and all done. So around food. That food is a motivator. So we learned with the brownie as well. But it never really went past that. And
That
then
was Alyssa too, Jaime. That's so funny. Those are, and she used more for everything, everything. Like, you know how when a little kid says please and they go through that
Yeah.
phase and they think if they say please and they can get what they want. That's how she was. So no matter what, it didn't have to be more of anything. That she wanted to go outside. She was like, she would be like, I'm doing it.
it was like
Give me
just
what
I
want.
want something. That's all it meant, was like I want something. And then all done, he didn't do it a lot, but it was funny because sometimes if someone was like in his face or he wanted to leave a situation or room, he would do all done. But it wasn't like enough to be like regular communication. So anyway, he lost communication, and that should have been like our first sign of autism. And we even went to like his 18-month appointment. I've talked about this before, but like we brought it up to the doctor, and the doctor wasn't too concerned because all his motor skills were on time, which like I've learned since is really not how that should have been graded, but whatever. So like there wasn't concern until like he was 2, but he was just always behind. And then his language was just always it was echolalia. So he would count. He could count to like 10 really little, but it was because he was just hearing that. And so he would just do that. So when they would like do like, okay, they should be saying like 25 words at this point, I would count like, well, he can say this many colors and he can count. So that's 1, 2, 3. Like I didn't realize it should have been more so communicative words or like words to communicate. And they don't say that. They just want them saying words. But for us, looking back, like it was an issue. And I just didn't realize it because I was just so counting. And it was like we were barely hitting those word counts or not hitting them quite. And so I just didn't think a big deal about it until after even he completely lost his words and he started getting some back. It was just all really repetitive things of like things he heard or whatever. But again, none of it to me felt like communication. Like he was not communicating. He didn't point at things. He didn't pull me to things all through like his toddler years. It was so like, I don't know. Like there would be like, sometimes he could do something, sometimes he couldn't. But like, if he did not want to communicate, he was not communicating. And that's like, I talked about this a few episodes ago, like even when like we were just trying to start therapies and stuff, it was like his desire wasn't there to even try anything. And then he started like repeating things he'd hear on shows. And I always talk about this one story where he was really upset about something and he kept repeating like, my blanket, which was a line from this Charlie Brown episode or show where Linus loses his blanket and he's so sad and distraught over it. And he was trying, and it was like appropriate in the way like he was trying to communicate he was sad, but the only way he could voice that was like through Linus's voice. And so it just took me a while to figure that out. I thought he was sad because he was thinking about Linus in his blanket, as opposed to him being sad and using that to communicate, kind of a thing.
And that's exactly what Jackie talked about today. That is, you gotta figure it out through what they're saying, what they're talking about, because they're telling you something through that script.
They are. And so I figured that out pretty soon with him. And he had a really great preschool special ed teacher. It wasn't even the speech therapist who kept saying like I would talk about him. So he started eventually, as he got older, we would use those scripts and like put them in certain situations. And she called it appropriate scripting for Echo. So it was like, okay, this is his communication. So our communication journey really came through echolalia and repeating. A show that he still watches to this day at 9 years old that he loves, it's called Word Party on Netflix. And I say the same thing. When he lost the speech around 18 months, I swear that show is what started building up his words again. And like, I don't know. I don't think Jesse has apraxia in the way, like, I don't know if it's about his mouth moving or anything like that, because I have been told that it technically could be the fact that like communication's not getting from the brain to the mouth, but it's not like a physical thing with his mouth. So I feel like some kids have like apraxia, which leads to like the communication issues. And then, but for Jesse, it was just like a miscommunication between his brain and his mouth. And like, I don't have a better way of saying, but he like doesn't have the desire to communicate. And now the last couple of years we've had such big leaps in communication. Like, I mean, I do have conversations with my son, which even when we started this podcast, did not have back and forth conversations with my son, but it's very much what he wants to talk about. So he'll talk to me back and forth about It's a Small World. It's his favorite ride. Today he did like the coolest thing. He has this little Small World game and it has all these cards that have the like different characters of the country, and he laid them out and like made the ride up with the cards. And he's like, this is Small World Hong Kong. Like he knows all the small worlds. And then we went and watched the Small World Hong Kong video, and he like legit had like the countries laid out in the right order and stuff. Like he was like communicating with that to us by showing us. But I also picked him up from school today and I said, how was school? And the only thing he'll say to me is good. And I said, like, did you read a book? And he said, yes. And I'm like, okay, what book did you read? And then nothing. Like, he's just done with the conversation. Like, he doesn't want to go any further. So I'm so grateful my son has words. And obviously the fact that I can talk with my son is like amazing. And I totally value that because it's always been a struggle. But it also is still difficult because that communication's not there of like things we need to know or things that could help him, or if someone hurt him or did something to him, I don't know if we would ever know about it. So it's still in this tough category, but we've just had to really figure out the ways he would communicate and build off of those. And I do kind of wish we would have tried an AAC device. Like we couldn't afford like the iPad and like the program. I mean, if he was completely nonverbal, I feel like that would have been more an avenue we would have been pushed towards. But since he had words, we were never really super pushed towards that. And I kind of wish I just would have tried it because the fact that he did learn so much from scripting like TV shows and especially Word Party and Charlie Brown and stuff like that. I'm like, I wonder if he had a device saying the words to it. And it wasn't just me being like, Apple, like maybe if he really wanted an Apple, he would have started pushing that Apple button. And that would have probably helped with a lot of the frustration. And I will say, still have a lot of behaviors, but it did help. The more words and language he had, it definitely helped when he could voice a lot of things.
Like your conversation, it's the same thing. Like she'll answer questions to me, but that's not conversational.
Yeah.
Right. And at this point, she can express her wants and needs, and she'll talk to me about things, but it's like you said, it's what interests her. Right. I always tell people the only way I can explain it is it's not a fluid conversation.
Yeah.
It's very,
Well, and the cool thing Jesse's been doing lately is he'll come and say something to us and he says the word incorrectly. And a couple times he's like corrected himself, which has been really cool. So I'm so grateful for where we are at with communication, but it's still hard in a long way. And I get that it's frustrating for him. And I can see that he sometimes can just not get it out. But also another funny thing is sometimes when he just wants me to go away, like the other day I did a live on my subscriber page and he just wanted my phone. So I was like, well, if you tell them about how baseball was, he will talk a little bit more. But it's just,
oh, mine's like, out, Jennifer, she's got no problem, putting me in my place.
Oh, Jesse has no problem. Like if Amelie Amelie is very sensitive, my daughter. And so if I like correct her on something, she gets upset pretty quick. And he'll be like, you made her mad. You made her cry. And I'm like, oh, good. You're good at accusing me of being a horrible mother.
Like, thanks, kid. Thanks for pointing it out.
So if you're interested in any of these programs or upgrading to a like bigger version, check this month for discounts. I saw that Assistive Wear has 50% off most of the.
And they're the ones that have the Prolo to Go app. The other created that.
From what I know, they're all, Prolo to Go for sure is like an Apple.
Yeah. They're all Apple.
Pictello.
Yeah, we have that too.
Is on sale too. So check that out. If I had
and and a lot of people say like they're really never too young to start it. And a lot of people do. I think what people get afraid of is afraid if they use the speech device, then they won't talk. And like that, and that won't happen. It really just also takes that level of frustration away from them if they're able to effectively use it, so they can like progress in other areas. And yeah, it really does help them a lot. Like it helped her a ton.
That's That's what I was struggling to remember. That's what she had said, is that there was a big misconception that if they use an AAC or any type of device like that they won't speak. And she was like, that's absolutely not the case. It helps them along. It gives them a voice. It takes the frustration away. It helps them learn to communicate.
And even kids that are verbal, that sometimes, at different times, like if they have their anxiety is really bad, or there's other stuff going on, sometimes the like Alyssa loses processing skills when she gets stressed. Like they just
right out the window.
Yeah, they go.
Yeah.
And obviously we all do, but when she's already working with like limited,
I wouldn't know about that. I'm very calm.
Yeah.
Put together. Wouldn't know about that.
She's already dealing with like limited comprehension, limited verbal skills. So when those limited things are now like out the window and she's frustrated and she's upset, like it's really hard, so it's like it takes times like that, might be a time that they can like kind of show you. And sometimes Alyssa will, sometimes it just kind of really depends on Alyssa's mood, really. And it doesn't have to be a speech device. Like you can use pictures. Like sometimes I look stuff up online to show her different choices. Like when we were on vacation, we let her choose the restaurant. Actually, nobody could agree on the restaurant. So I showed her Chili's. I showed her Applebee's and Olive Garden. And she was like, Chili's.
I was going to say, just in general, like if Prolo to go doesn't work for you or something doesn't work for you, just try everything. Like Jesse was the same. Visuals work really well for Jesse. Like even just reminding him of what he needs to go. And that receptive language is such a big part of communication too. Like which we really didn't dive into, but keep that in your mind too. The processing is such a big part of it. Receptive language, just being able to understand, like that's a big thing with Jesse. Like he can't understand a lot of information at once. And so we have to remember that too, to be like, but like pictures are really good for him. He also like will use pictures as example, like in preschool, they would have like circle time and they would have a picture of Jesse on the wall sitting for circle time and they would point to that. And him just seeing that visual worked so much better than them being like, Jesse, sit, Jesse, sit. He would see the picture and be able to sit down. So try it all. A big thing we always did too was like, this actually is a little triggering for me because I just remember him being like wanting communication so bad from him when he was a toddler. But I would just stand there with like an apple and an orange. And I'd be like, do you want an apple or do you want an orange? Or I'd do like milk or juice. Milk, just hoping that he would point at one of them. And like sometimes it was probably like I probably should have done it like one time, held it for a minute, and then just put it away if he didn't choose. But I was so like, do you want the apple or do you want the orange? Like, because I just wanted him to like communicate. So
well, and I think there's also a thing with the processing time that I think I just think first of all, it's a natural thing to do this, like where you're like, oh, you want a bottle, you want juice, can you and then you do it and do it and doing it, and then they're like now their brains have shut down, like, and they're not like no lady, you're crazy, I'm out of here. With Alyssa, one of the speech therapists that worked at the house was like, she's like, give her a minute. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like,
let her process it.
She's like, just wait. And then Alyssa followed the command. And I was like, what? Because her receptive language is a lot better now, but it was pretty weak then. But like, you're repeating yourself because it's like you're trying to give them the repetition so they can hear it and you're slowing it down. But sometimes it's like you have to take a beat. And I think it's a hard thing because it's like it's like a natural thing. That's what we do with like toddlers and young kids, and but the processing thing is so different with them. So sometimes you have to like step back and give them a minute to like how Jaime was saying apple and orange. Like you gotta like say apple and orange and then wait. And 30 seconds is a long time to wait for an answer. Like
it's hard to wait, but you're 100% right. Like even now, like you can like Jaime said, like I can see her trying to like press it down out,
I have to catch myself sometimes now, and sometimes even Neil will do it, and I'll be like, all right, stop. Because he'll be like, oh, Alyssa, come eat. And then she doesn't come eat. And he's like, Alyssa, come eat. And then she starts yelling. But like, first of all, she has to stop whatever she's doing. She has to stop. She can't just put her iPad down and come out. She has to like
finish it.
Stop what she's doing or finish what she's doing. Get out of that part of the app, shut it down, go to the home screen, close out the home screen, put it back, then she'll get up and then she'll come out. So she has this whole process, and it's like you, but every time you're repeating the command, she's like, it's like you're losing, she's going 2 steps back. So it's like sometimes you just have to like stop and let them like process the information. Basically, I didn't know that until she was like 10 years old.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I remember them telling me that like the whole wait a minute, like give Jesse a question, and he would never answer. So it's not like I waited a minute and he magically answered, but I wasn't like I wanted to give him the chance to process. But that finishing whatever they're doing is such a big thing. And I think that even for me, it's like if I'm in the middle of a show and then they're like, it's dinner, like it is frustrating. You're like, oh, let me just finish the last 5 minutes of my show or whatever. I do think like
Just to be clear, nothing stops me from running to dinner. Okay, I don't care what's happening. Food is ready.
But for our kids, it's like, I have to be like, okay, Jesse, you have 5 more minutes or you've got to finish this up. Give those time warning. And sometimes he keeps going anyway or whatever. But like, I have to kind of be over him and see when he's about to finish a video. I'm like, okay, now we're done. Like, but if I try to pull away in the middle of like a video,
that would be like terrible. Actually, I remember her teachers commented that like if she was working on a page in a workbook, they knew that they had to give her time to finish that because she couldn't just walk away from it.
Yeah.
That page had to be finished. So I think that's her maybe anxiety in her kids and all the things.
All the things.
So we're down to 2 here now. We're just rocking it.
Kimmy's phone kicked her off.
Kimmy's left the chat.
So we're gonna say goodbye. Thank you, everyone. Happy AAC Awareness Month. But thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next time for episode 3 of this series.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Talk Like a Mother Parenting Autism podcast. If you are enjoying our podcast, make sure to rate and review us wherever you listen. And if you'd like to support us, you can become a subscriber. Just check out the description of this episode. Give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram for more content, and we'll see you next time.